We got a ton of players that are going to be free agents this season, or in the event of like Maxx Crosby, no guaranteed money. We threw him into this mix. So Spot Track does a pretty cool thing where they figure out the market rate for a player on their position. And again, not hard numbers. There's a lot of, fit, scheme, who's more valuable where, do you have a lot of those players? It's obviously all very important. But if you just took like, hey, of the 32 teams out there, what would the average salary of this player be? And Spot Track's pretty good at it. It's not gospel, but it's an excellent place to start. It's a beautiful place to be like, let's start here and figure out if it makes sense or not. So let's go through, and we'll throw Maxx Crosby in here, of the free agents coming up out of the Raiders, what their proposed salary value is, and then see if we like, hey, we'll pay that, we won't. This guy I think we can get for cheaper because he's so much better here. This guy, I don't see the value, or this guy's not that good, but dude, if we get him for that cheap, let's for sure take a stab at him, and we'll go down the line. Maxx Crosby, again, 2 years left on his deal, no guaranteed money. He's pretty sure he's going to get a new contract this season. 3-year length, $100 million, roughly $32 million a season. You kind of have to do that. He's only 27 years old. I don't think he would require more. I think he wants to stay home. Maybe even a smidge cheaper, because he got his last contract, he for sure got paid, but it was, I think, a smidge cheaper than if he would have been on the open market. I think. Well,
also too, if we redo his deal, we're going to open up even more cap space this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's easily done. You can do it on just give him some straight cash, homie, like a roster bonus, signing bonus, bang, here you go. Yeah. Just knock out a bunch of that shit right off the bat. You don't have to worry about it.
I wonder if we should have opened with this. I wonder how the Raiders are going to do this because there's so much cap space. I wonder if they do backload contracts. If there's like, let's just front load it because we got time now. Like, why kick the can down the street when we've got so much money to pay the piper right this second?
If you were to front load contracts, you would probably front load, let's say, a Sam Darnold contract, because it's more enticing to get him to come over, number one, and number two, Maxx Crosby is going to produce, so you're not worried about having him be backloaded. He's already a proven commodity at his position, so it's better to backload his and front load to entice a Sam Darnold to come.
Very true. I think the other half of that coin, though, also is, do the Raiders really feel like they can win now? So if they're front loading, they're like, okay, we probably still have a year or two before we think we're true contenders. Let's save that. Let's save some cap space for 2027, right? Like, all right, we're winning the Super Bowl in 2 seasons. So let's make sure we got cap space to bring in, some all-pro safety or fill in a hole with somebody that we desperately need. I also wonder how much, because obviously Telesco clearly was like, we're not winning this season. Like, let's just have all our draft picks. Let's have all the cap space.
I don't think the plan was ever to try extra hard with all the cap space that he just didn't spend, even though we had holes that he could have filled with that cap space. So that was the plan. And, it worked in a sense where, yes, you have a ton of cap space, but he also left more than half of the starting defense without contracts.
Yeah.
Which is, not great. You would have wanted to maybe tie up 1 or 2 of those guys to make things easier. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the whole cap space thing for us is a little bit of fool's gold in that respect, because most of those guys there was 17 contributors on defense that we have to re-sign. That's a lot of spots.
It ended up being a blessing because now the new regime with these guys can decide who they want, right? So instead of Telesco deciding it, and then Spytech and Carroll are like, all right, we just signed this guy to 4-year deal. We got to make it work even if we don't want him. So it ended up being a giant blessing, right? Where like this whole new regime gets to decide who we keep and how we want to pay him. I'm just saying it's a narrative to follow when these contracts start getting signed, if they're front loaded or back loaded. I think if they're front loaded, it's a sign. Yeah, they don't think we're going to win. We're going to do some longer contracts with these good guys to save money down the line. They're back loaded, like, oh, they're making some moves right now.
Dude, if we give Divine Deablo $15 million over 2 years, I'm going to riot.
Yeah. Well, let's go down the line. Koonce, $20 million a year. They're saying 2 years, $40 million. I mean, obviously, edge rushers are premium. I thought with the injury, he basically had one half of one season where he was elite and then got hurt. How many teams are offering Malcolm Koonce $40 million for 2 years?
Well, the problem is, I don't think that the Eagles doing what they did is doing us any. Shut the hell up.
Well,
I don't think that the Eagles doing what they did with their defensive line is doing us any favors with Malcolm Koonce.
mm-hmm.
I think that some teams that have a need at the position and some cap space are going to want to just kind of scour and see who are the best edge rushers available. And Malcolm Koonce is one of the best available. Yeah, he's going to get some looks for sure. I think the only way that we can keep him around is by offering a longer deal. That's all depending on how he's doing with his recovery with his injury. If the recovery with his injury is going, according to plan, I think Koonce being the player and having been the one who got injured in a contract year would value the length of a contract more than just the funny money, because that it's all about what's guaranteed, and if you have more years, you should have more guaranteed than 2 years guaranteed. So that'd be just the only kind of thing that we can do to kind of entice him to stick around, is to do maybe an extra year that other teams wouldn't do and spread out that guaranteed money a little bit more.
And if the Raiders are even halfway intelligent, they should have the best medical reports on him, right?
Oh, yeah,
and so
sure.
if the Raiders are like, this injury is worse than people are suspecting, and they let him walk, this is the one, because it's been rare where we're just like, oh, we'll just trust the Raiders, just trust John Gruden, trust Mayock, trust JMD, just trust these guys. They know what they're doing. They're doing something for a reason. Like, that's not been the case. With Malcolm Koonce, I'm going to kind of trust them, because they're going to, unless they're completely moronic, they're going to know the status of that knee better than any of us and any other team. So he's the rare guy where they're like, yeah, let him go for $18 million a year. I mean, I like to keep him, but maybe the only time in the last 5 seasons I'm like, I'm just going to trust the team because they know the medical records.
Well, also, you got to think about this too. Spytek came from a team that had 46 drafted or UDFAs on their team that they picked up. 20 out of the 22 starters were either drafted or signed UDFA. So he's familiar with how to keep your players.
Yeah.
What are the things you have to do to keep your own players on your team? If we can keep Koonce and Chaisson, I think that would be amazing, because Snowden's still under our control. I think it'd be great.
I think that's the biggest thing against us keeping Koonce is injury, and we have a whole bunch of other defensive ends that are either like top-notch rotational guys. Maybe Pete Carroll's like Tyree Wilson. I can turn this guy into a stud. Like you mentioned, like we've been so good at finding just off the scrap heap quality rotational defensive ends. It's like, do we want to commit another $40 million to another one?
Look at the Eagles did, man. They're 9 deep.
Eagles did.
Nine freaking deep. And that's without their top free agent signing, even dressing for the game. They're 9 deep. And I think that the defense that we saw in the Super Bowl, that's the way that we wanted to play, and that's the way we would have played had we had all of our defensive linemen healthy. That's the way. That's what we wanted to do, because that's what Patrick Graham did when AP took over. He wasn't blitzing like crazy. If anything, he was blitzing like a corner blitz or something like that. It was just our front four kicking ass on the offensive linemen and sagging back, and that's how we got all those turnovers, and that's how we were able to get the best scoring defense during that span. If you want to go that direction, then you have to sign Koonce and Chaisson. You need to have that talent on that defensive line.
Did you see what Max said about Koonce on that Sirius XM show. He was just all about him. He's just all about him.
He loves him, dude.
He's great. I mean, he was great for half a season. Hopefully that's what continues for his sake.
Well, I mean, you can't realistically, because you can, of course, but realistically, if you take a look at the situation, the whole Mick Ziegler, they were pushing Tyree Wilson out there when we were like, why isn't Koonce playing more? You know? Mm-hmm. And as soon as AP took over, he's like, no, we're not doing that. Tyree Wilson, you can play tackle if you want, but Koonce is a better edge rusher, and we want to win games. And I didn't draft the dude. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't the guy that, wrote the name on the card. So he just paid the best player there. And once he was given that opportunity, you could see how it changed the defense. So there's plus and minuses. Another thing that we haven't talked about is, I mean, dude, Koonce is a Gruden Mayock draft pick. This is 2 regimes ago. Like, there's no ties whatsoever to whoever's in front office. But we also don't want to do what Mick Ziegler did and get rid of a bunch of good players just because they're not your guys, right? You just keep the best players available and figure it out. So, I mean, it's, again, just kind of like with the draft, the quarterback thing. This thing is just so many moving parts, man.
He's the second most complicated free agent signing based on what does the rest of the league think about him, because he's had one half of one good season. We have a good amount of defensive. If there's any position we have more depth than any, like, good players and depth, it's defensive end. Does the rest, like the Tyree Wilson factor, is like, does anyone think they can trust him to be the guy or not? And then I'll affect the Koonce thing. So it's like, he's the second most complicated one. The next guy's the most complicated one. Trevon Moehrig, 3 years, $47 million. That's over $15 million per year. There's a lot of safeties that are going to be available. He's going to be one of the top ones. That's a lot of money. We all want him. There's no question about that. A lot of money for a safety. I feel like Patrick Graham loves him. I think it's going to add to us wanting to keep him more. But I think he'll be the hardest to hold on to because of the market and his age.
I don't know if he's going to be that hard. It's just, you just got to pay the money.
That's what I mean by hard. Whoever pays the most.
Ultimately, look, if you want to have good players on your team, you have to pay them, right? You have to pay the guys eventually. And when you have a player that's going to be entering his prime of his career, you got to pay that guy. And especially if you're running a defense that is as complex in the secondary as a Patrick Graham defense. He asks a lot of his secondary. Mm-hmm. You're going to need those guys. And is there other guys out there who can do a job similar? Yeah, but it's not the guy that you've seen do it, and the guy that can hit the ground running because he knows exactly what to do. So there's a lot of advantages to keeping Moehrig around. The first and foremost is he's a really good player, and he's going to be one of the top safeties available, if not the top safety available out there. And the whole combination of his career trajectory, he just keeps getting better and better. He seems to put it all together this year. When Epps was gone, who was kind of like the vocal leader in the secondary, he stepped up. You have a running mate in Polamalu who just showed that he's an absolute stud. Okay, let's put these pieces together. It's a misnomer that these teams are like strictly built from the draft. Mm-hmm. If you're re-signing your own guys, that's an extension of free agency. Okay, it's not a true free agency because you didn't let the guy leave, but if you don't sign him, he's gonna eventually they're gonna leave. So that discovery, draft, and development, his whole development part, you're developing the guy for a reason. And when the time comes, you don't want to let all your development go to waste. And I think Trevon Moehrig is a completely different player than what we thought he was when he came out of TCU. I think he's a much more well-rounded and an effective player than that, center fielder safety.
Well, that's exactly why I think it's going to be hard to keep him, because he played so well, and I think he fits so well in the Patrick Graham system. Again, I don't think he's some schlub that's just a system safety, But I think I think he'll excel under Patrick Graham more than he could under just a standard operating procedure, which is why I think maybe the Raiders would let him go. Because like, well, he looked really, really good, and he is really, really good, but we think it's part of the system. There's going to be a lot of demand for it. Again, I want to keep him, but if someone's offering him $20 million a year in 4 years, it's like can't do it, right? But again, that's why I think he's the most complicated one, is because of all the moving parts. We're 20 minutes into the segment. We've only done 3 players, so we'll move along. Robert Spillane, $20 million for 2 years. I think he's way more valuable on the Raiders than anywhere else. I don't think anyone else is looking at Robert Spillane as like a must-have. I'll break the bank for him at all. I'm pretty confident we could keep him for market, or even maybe a little below market. He loves being at the Raiders, and I think other teams aren't looking at him as like anything crazy.
What we have to take a look at too is he going to be able to stretch himself a little bit? The Pete Carroll linebackers, they're asked to cover a lot of space, man. That's something that we need to kind of keep in consideration. If we can get, let's say, the mindset and the physicality of a Spillane, but let's say the mobility of a Deablo, that's kind of like the prototype Pete Carroll linebacker. Mm-hmm. Can we kind of make it work? Sure. I think that Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham, they're talented enough and flexible enough to be able to make that happen. But he's definitely not a prototypical linebacker that Pete Carroll would like. He's a little bit more boxy than the prototypical linebackers that he's had in the past.
I think Patrick Graham is, Graham's talked about how he's his eyes and ears on the field, and Graham loves him so much, and I don't think there'll be a giant demand outside of the room for him. Mm-hmm. I think they can convince him that I could be wrong, but I'm predicting he's the easiest signing that we have as far as like top-notch players that we're going to be paying more than 10 million, 10-ish million or whatever. I think he'll be the easiest one to keep. Could be wrong. We'll see how it plays out. Divine Deablo, I know you hate this one. $50 million for 2 years, $7.5 million for a 26-year-old inside linebacker.
Look, if you're a former safety, you should be able to cover a whole lot better than what Divine Deablo is able to cover. Yeah. And that's kind of like, if you're going to be an undersized.
I wonder if that's why they moved him. They're like, this guy can't cover. We got to move you up to the line.
I mean, look, yeah, he had a bigger frame for a safety. He was a little bit bigger, and he was able to transition, pretty nicely into the linebacker role. But his coverage ability is just not there if you're going to be an undersized linebacker. There's a few guys in the draft right now that you can get that are better coverage linebackers. That dude, Knight Jr. from South Carolina, you could pick that guy up probably, maybe in the 4th or 5th round. Dude's like 6'2", 245. That guy's a freaking animal. Way better coverage skills, and his skills aren't where they need to be across the board for him to be able, for anyone to justify paying him that kind of money.
It will be a shame to lose the coolest name on the team, Divine Deablo.
It's a nice name.
That's the coolest name on the team. That's the coolest name I've ever seen on a football player. Harrison Bryant, we got the best tight end room in football, and Harrison Bryant rounded out nicely. $3.5 million for 1 year. You want to pay $3.5 for a good blocking tight end?
There are some nice tight ends / H-backs, which is basically what you're going to need in a Chip Kelly offense. You're going to need a guy that's going to be able to run block on the move, not just inline type of tight end style. Mm-hmm. There's actually quite a few tight end / H-back players in the draft this year. A lot. So I think we're going to be able to fill that role of a third tight end / H-back type of guy through the draft.
I think the only thing that could save him is how Chip Kelly views Brock Bowers. You're just like, oh yeah, he's tight end by name only. Like if I'm going to line up 2 tight ends, it's going to be Mayer and Bryant or whoever else. I'm more or less with you. Almost $4 million for a third tight end. I don't get it. But if Chip's like, no, we'll have Brock and 2 tight ends on the field because I don't view Brock as a tight end, that might be the only thing that saves him, but I'm more or less with you. Chaisson, 2 years, $6.8 million is 3.4. Only 25 years old. I keep forgetting.
No brainer. That's a no brainer. Mm-hmm. If you sign him for that, you give it to him right now.
Yep. I'd sign him for longer. I'd try to give him a 3-year. I don't think he'd take it.
Yeah,
I don't think he'd take it. But
he might not want to do that though.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he would. But if he feels like he can't get anywhere. Adam Butler, 2 years, $5.7 million, 2.8 a year. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure.
We can get him for that cheap. We'll keep going fast because this is taking forever. We're on a bunch of 1-year guys. I'll select a couple and then we'll just kind of group them all. Nate Hobbs, 1 year, 2.8. This was the one that I had my biggest eyebrow raise. That's pennies for I guess a prove it year, right? Like, can you stay healthy, Nate? Right? Like, can you stay healthy? That's basically what this contract would be. Can you prove that you can stay healthy for an entire season? Here's 2.8. You for sure do that.
Yeah, it's more than likely it's going to be a 1-and-1, a club option for the year 2. Mm-hmm. Give yourself some time and flexibility to create some, a little bit of cap space, I guess. If he does perform well this first year, you have that option second year to be able to extend and give yourself maybe a little bit of relief, or the other way around to front load and give yourself a little bit of relief the following year. But yeah, 2.8 is a little, it's a little tough. Because look, he wasn't even lighting the world on fire even when he was playing. So we had overall our corners had the worst coverage grades overall in the NFL last year. So it wasn't like these guys were, knocking the doors down to the Hall of Fame or anything.
Yeah, I think when Nate Hobbs is flashed or put together third, fourth goods, 1/3 of a great season at 2.8 to prove he can stay healthy, I think that's with how much cap space we have. I think you do it.
Yeah.
Everyone else is $2 million or below 1-year deals. John Jenkins, Cody Whitehair, Amir Abdullah, Marcus Epps, Alexander Madison, Andreas Pete, Darnay Holmes. Any one of these guys, you're like, it's not worth the lint in my pocket. And any of these guys, you're like, sign them right now if we can get them for that.
No, just let them go. If you want to bring back Darnay Holmes, maybe as not even then, because you can get a young guy. It depends on how they feel about Darnay Holmes. I think he played okay when he was in there late in the year. He came in and he was used to the Patrick Graham system. He had played for him for a year with the Giants, and he did okay. I think he got an interception. But that's probably the only name I'd see that I would give any money to that you can't really get better production from somewhere else, especially the offensive line. Those guys are god-awful, dude.
I think Jenkins, because I don't think it's the age that's the big issue with him.
Yeah,
right? 35 years old for a defensive tackle.
$35 million. Because look,
but he got better. That's the thing, though. He hasn't been declining. He improved last season. So I like it's like, okay, every now and then there's the mid-30s dudes that can have a lot of longevity, and he's proven that he's gotten better in back-to-back seasons. Like, okay, even if he holds serve, he's worth $2 million.
You want to give him that if he's like a Vince Wilfork, that type of guy. Like when he doesn't play every snap, but when he's in there, you can see that he's dominating, right? Mm-hmm. That's just not who he is. So we talked about the high probability of drafting Mason Graham. There's no need or room in on the defensive line for John Jenkins if you have Mason Graham there and Adam Butler. You Wilkins. Got Wilkins.
This is all pre-draft, right? This is all kind of pre-draft and also pre what we do at quarterback. If we're spending $150 million on a quarterback, we got to start tightening the belt in other places. But I feel like we were very optimistic. There was only the only money guys were like, nah, that's too much. Was Deablo, and we're like, yeah, I think that's a fair amount of money, and I want to keep him.
You signed seven of these guys. I think 7 of the top 9. I think 7 of the top 9 guys.
Pretty happy.
Yeah, we're good with that.
Hey, you made it to the end of our video. Great job. I know you want more. Go ahead and click the next video, and if you're feeling crazy, go ahead and subscribe.